This is radio for the revolution at ronpaulradio.com.
Man, tell me that beat don't bang. Anyways, I'm getting a little too hype right now. You're back. I'm your host, Paco. You're checking out Occupy the Media. I want to thank you if you're tuning in. Just want to say the In It to Win It Money Bomb is April the 15th. With Santorum out, this is our chance to surge. So please urge listeners to save up whatever money they can between now and then to donate to the campaign. And for more info, you can go to intowin2012.com. Again, that's intowin2012.com, or you can hit me up on Facebook, Paco Elijah. Again, Paco Elijah. Now, I have this clip here from CNN. I wanted to play it yesterday, but I had problems getting my file ready. Looks like I got it up now. Hopefully everything should go good. This is a really important clip. Okay, so Soledad O'Brien is giving an interview. And this came on about 2 mornings ago. Yeah, not yesterday, but the day before. Maybe like, 6, 7 in the morning, something like that on CNN. Okay, so she's doing an interview with a lady, I forget, she's from Australia, I believe, and I forgot what newspaper or what organization she's with. But anyways, she was actually able to get interviews with the witnesses and I think some of the victims as well in the Afghanistan massacre. Now, not very many people have been able to do this, but she was able to get through. And what happens is Soledad interviews her, and she tells about what happens, and she goes into how the stories are not adding up and mixed up. And, you can hear Soledad try to bring that back and say, well, maybe, for the most part, all the stories are the same. And she's basically saying she interviewed 4 people, and the stories are different, 2 one side, 2 the other. And so there is a great possibility, and I read it elsewhere, that there was more than one person with this Afghan massacre, and we need to get the truth out about that. So I know she said a little more than Soledad O'Brien wanted her to, a little more than the truth. So I'm about to play that because I think it's really important that our listeners hear it. All right, so here we go. Soledad O'Brien, CNN, about the Afghanistan massacre.
The Army now putting together a sanity board to look into what happened when a U.S. soldier allegedly went on a deadly killing spree in Afghanistan. The sergeant's name is Robert Bales. He is charged with murdering 17 Afghan villagers, including 9 children. Happened in the middle of the night about a month ago. Yalda Hakim of Australia's SBS network was the first Western journalist to visit the villages and speak to the survivors, who described in detail what happened. Listen.
As 8-year-old Nuri Banak watched her parents desperately trying to fend off the intruder, he turned his gun on her and shot her in the leg.
Yalda Hakim joins us this morning. She's in Sydney, Australia. Nice to talk to you. Thanks for being with us. First, how difficult was it for you to negotiate to get into the villages and then even sort of have the opportunity to ask questions of the villagers?
Well, I was initially denied access, Soledad, by both the US military as well as the Afghan army. As you can imagine, this was an extremely dangerous area to travel into. And after the attack, the Taliban was starting to use the area as a battlefield, and they had laid out booby traps, IEDs and mines in and around the village and the crime scene. So it was extremely difficult to then convince the Afghan army to allow me to go in. It wasn't until we personally requested from Hamid Karzai, the president of Afghanistan, to intervene that the path was cleared. And at that point, we were given military access and support by the Afghan National Police, who escorted us into the village. Of course, because I speak the local languages, I was able to gain the trust of the local people, the witnesses, who opened up and gave me very heartful accounts of what happened on that horrific night.
And those accounts are truly heartbreaking. So I want to play a couple of different pieces. I'm going to have you talk to me about them. The first is from one child that you interviewed, Sadikia, I think is the name. I'll play what he said to you, and then I'll ask you on the other side about this child. Go ahead, play that.
Андвар когда возьмем дентально удалётся, если удалёт дентекси мушачо, если удалёт. На пляже второго-то на пляже балауишти. Это чувствуете, может похуни сиран, но ты может я хуни савар для были хуни-то. А были хуни-то чувар для бара, для того что для бара, да.
Oh, it's heartbreaking. He says, when my father came out, he, meaning the soldier he's talking about, shot my father. Then he entered our room. We ran from room to the other room, and he came out and he shot us in that room, is what he's saying there. What was it like to interview that child who literally has almost no emotion on his face when he's talking to you?
Absolutely. I mean, there were some disparities between the stories. The little girl that I spoke to told me that she saw numerous Americans in her home. And that young boy told me that there was one American inside his house killing his family members. As you can imagine, it was extremely difficult to listen to these traumatic stories. And, of course, the trauma that these children had suffered. You know, they were sleeping in their homes and someone entered their house and began killing their family members. It was an extremely difficult story to listen to.
Here's another child, Noor Binak is the name, and I'll tell everyone first what this child's saying. He shot my father's dog first, then shot my father in the foot, dragged my mother by the hair. My mother's screaming. He held a gun to her. My father said, leave her alone, and he shot my father right there. Let's play a little bit of what this child has to say.
Badai takane wakala mapla iplas spayush bez mapla psychush bez mamora dagay vestan savakada wala mamor chak.
How many children, Yelda, did you have an opportunity to interview? And for the most part, would you say, were their stories consistent outside of that number of soldiers issue?
Yes, it was conflicted. I mean, I spoke to 4 witnesses in total, 3 of who were children. And, of course, it's always difficult to know whether a child actually saw what they did. I spoke to one adult. Her name was Amina, and she told me about how her husband was shot in the head and how she dragged him back into the house and his brains were in her hands. She told me that 15 to 20 Americans were out in her yard. When she went outside to find out what had happened, her to go back inside or she would be killed too. That's the claim that she made. And like I said, there were some disparities in the story. Nuri Banak, the young girl, said there were several Americans in her house. Amina, it's not her real name. She wasn't actually allowed to speak to anyone. It's the first time that she's actually spoken to anyone. It was only because I was able to speak the language and I was a woman that I was able to get access to her. She told me there were several Americans in her yard. But of course, the 2 young boys I spoke to, the other 2 witnesses, said only one American soldier entered their house and began to shoot at them.
Is this possible that this could be a crime scene of any use? We know now that American authorities have gone in and kind of swept the area. A fair amount of time had passed before they were able to get access. But one would imagine, even when you just sort of look at the circumstances and some of the videotape that you've shot, that the crime scene has been damaged. I mean, in the sense of how do you gain physical evidence from it at this point?
Absolutely. The unfortunate thing is that because of Islamic rituals, they bury their dead immediately. And when I went into the villages, the scene looked quite different to the initial few days where images had come out of those homes and villages. The bloodstains had generally been removed and washed away. General Karimi, who was the chief investigator appointed by President Hamid Karzai, told me the whole area had been disturbed. So many people had entered those houses since the crime itself that it was difficult to know whose boot print was whose, whether there were a number of American soldiers who'd entered the area or if it was one. It was difficult to know because, as he said, the whole area had been disturbed by the time these investigators had gone in.
Yelda Hakim is a journalist and a presenter for Dateline SBS television in Australia. Thank you for your reporting and thank you for joining us this morning. We certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for doing our job. You know you ain't thanking her. CNN, MSNBC, you guys should have been reporting the truth. These other reports coming out. Anyways, we'll talk about this clip when I get back. Occupy the Media. I'm your host, Paco.